So let me share my screen.
Are we just waiting?
No, I'm just getting set up right now. All right, so this morning we're going to get started with the creative portion of the lecture, and then we'll take a short little break and then come back and do some more of the technical stuff and go over the level blocking meshes, things like that. So for today, we're going to cover just common progression models in games, as you'll see up on the screen now. Then we'll talk about the LDD assignment, as well as talk about an IPM chart and what that means and how you can apply that to your own level. So here you're going to see a few different images that depict different types of progression models in games. So the very first two at the top, linear and string of pearls. Pretty straightforward, very, very simply, single start, you don't have any options there, completely linear gameplay, and the ending is going to be the same every single time. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. It's a little bit different from string of pearls. So string of pearls has these non-linear chunks in between and then choke points where it's going to be the same. So the same choke point ever. So this could be a cutscene or a changing of a level, but every player is going to see these same choke points no matter on what they do in this middle here. So does anybody have any ideas of what type of game would be linear or string of pearls? I don't have an example game. Austin?
Mario.
Yeah.
Mario? Okay. And where would that fit?
Linear.
Okay, yep. Anybody else? Kyle?
For the string of pearls, like Call of Duty or Battlefield single players?
Yep, right, because each one of these are levels, and you can traverse those levels different ways, but when you get to the ending, almost every level has the same type of ending.
Yeah.
So Halo, Battlefield,
Battlefield.
Call of Duty.
StarCraft.
StarCraft?
You go into a level and then there's a choke point and you enter another level after debriefing.
You're talking about the RTS?
Yeah.
In the campaign.
That's a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some branches.
So what about, I'm going to give an example. What about like an endless runner? Oh.
Oh yeah, that would be the top linear one.
The first one.
Right? Get feedback up.
What did you do?
Hopefully I didn't break it. There we go.
It's like in Tommy Boy. What did you do?
And we're back. All right. So an endless runner, right? Like the Impossible game or just any other type of, start here. You just keep going, Temple Run. Also think about these not just in video games, right? So like a foot race or a marathon, that's definitely linear as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Monopoly.
There's definitely more, I would say there's more of a branching. So we could actually start to talk about some other ones of these as we go forward. And we're going to start to see that these aren't just like fixed, every single game is one of these and there's only these 6. These are just identified different types that you should be aware of, and then you can start to choose which ones are available for you, and maybe you can modify them and have chunks of each individual one in one actual game itself. So branching and reductive, these look basically the same but just inverted. So branching, you have a single start, and you have some gameplay, you give the player a choice or there's some type of option, and now it separates off and then you end up with a bunch of different endings. So reductive is a bit different than that. You have a lot of different options to begin with, and you reduce down, and you give the player or every ending is the same. So Chris, do you have an example of one of these?
Or branching, I was thinking the Mass Effect series.
Yep, great example of that. A lot of options for the character, and it definitely affects all the other endings, as well as they did a really good job of bringing it into other games, right? Mass Effect and Dragon Age, you can bring your save in from one game and it will impact all the choices you made on the next series. Miles, did you have an example?
Star Fox.
Star Fox, yeah.
Star Fox?
Yep, that's definitely a really good example
Oh,
of branching.
Yeah, so, I mean, even the map looks like that. You go through all the planets and get to your different endings.
All right, so anyone have any examples for reductive?
Yes.
What do you got, Miles?
World of Warcraft. You're gonna start out at your own race with a whole bunch of different possibilities, and you slowly.
But what's there's really no ending to World of Warcraft, right?
Well, you gotta beat the last boss.
But that'll fit into a different category.
Okay.
For reductive,
Okay.
what does this image actually look like? Give you a hint, any sports fans? What does this look like to you?
Super Smash Brothers.
Looks like a bracket.
It looks like a bracket, right? If you have any tournament, right, you have all your teams entering, gets reduced down. Here's your quarterfinals, semifinals, and your finals. So this could be any sports tournament. Also a Rubik's Cube, right? There's a million different combinations in the beginning, but you can reduce it down, solve the first algorithm, solve the second, and the third, you get to that fixed ending. All right, so on to so football shaped and sandbox. These are a bit different, but share a lot of the same elements. So football shaped is, single start. You're going to start the game the same. All players are going to have the same experience. It's just a whole big non-linear gameplay, a big chunk here. I'm just going to throw out a hint, just the word sandbox. A lot of sandbox gameplay, but you still have that same ending. You still have that final thing that the player is accomplishing, that every player has that same goal in mind. And with a sandbox, a lot of options in the beginning, totally open world, a lot going on, and just no ending. The game will play forever. So any examples for this? Kyle?
For football shaped, I'd say Crisis, the first one.
The first Crisis? Okay. What about it makes it non-linear? Because I've played Crisis 2 and 3.
The world is completely like open. I mean, they have separate levels, but within the levels, you can pretty much go wherever you want and do whatever you want.
That would be more of a non-string of pearls then, right? Because if there's levels you're picking from a menu or levels you're progressing, each level itself is non-linear, but you're having those choke points in between levels. Journey?
The game Journey.
It's just a big open sandbox game?
The player can choose to collect different things first around the entire world. It's only like once.
There's just one huge world, and then one fixed ending at the end?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then for the non-linear gameplay, Far Cry.
Far Cry?
Far Cry.
But in Far Cry, isn't there?
There's so many different endings, and you can play it out multiple different ways.
Okay, so that seems like, from what you're describing, it sounds like that has branching in it, but then each one of these bubbles is a sandbox, right? So this is where they start to blend over and over. So this one doesn't have a definitive spot, but it sounds like Far Cry could be a mixture of both. Hayden?
Skyrim for football shape.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
So Skyrim falls in, or non-linear football shape falls into basically all of your sandbox types games. So Crackdown, GTA, Witcher, it's an open world game. Yep, Just Cause, a good example. Austin, you have one? Oh, Miles. This is his last name, right? Zelda? Yeah, that's football. Football shape?
Link to the Past, Opening of Time, Majora's Mask.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, because there's a lot of open world and single start. Yep. So I'm gonna just throw a few out there. I want you guys to tell me which category you think it's gonna fit into. So, what about the game of football?
The actual game?
The actual game of football.
I would say the football game. No, Because it can have two different unique endings.
I know.
String of
I was
pearls.
just- I was-
Exactly, string of pearls, right? Just looking at it, your nonlinear. This is each quarter, and then these choke points are the end of the first quarter, halftime, end of the third quarter, end of the game. Yep,
But
good,
what about
good job.
You can have two different unique endings.
I mean, if the fixed ending is one team wins. That's your fixed ending.
Okay.
You're gonna get the same result. At the end of it, one of these teams is gonna win.
Okay.
But in between each quarter, anything could happen.
But it's the way it's played is the same.
Let's see. What about so what about World of Warcraft?
That would be the bottom.
Yep, that would be sandbox, right? Any MMO, any major game like that, where you just have lots of choices in the beginning. You can create your own character, a lot of different choices that will actually impact your gameplay and change how the game is played for different players. And there's also, you'll just play that game forever. Chris?
Would Ark fit into a sandbox game?
Ark?
Yeah, so it's survival. Well, I mean, I know that it's one of those things where it's like there is no ending and all you're doing is just building stuff for survival and for fun and like taming dinosaurs and stuff like that. But
Well, it sounds, from what you're describing, Ark sounds similar to like Minecraft almost? To where that?
like Minecraft, but on crack.
Okay, so yeah, Minecraft is also a sandbox game. There's no ending to that. You'll play that forever. It's just a set of tools to have an awesome experience. So it sounds like that would fit into that same realm. Tim?
Would the simulator type games be in sandbox as well? Like SimCity or?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, The Sims itself is definitely in a sandbox setting. Jude?
I have a question. Would Witcher fit into the football shape because it has multiple endings,
All the endings correlate to each other though.
but they're all different?
Very
Is
similar.
do all players, no matter what they do in the game, see the exact same thing at the end?
No.
So then that'd be a mixture between football shaped and branching, right? So in these bubbles, if in The Witcher, do you also have choices throughout the way like this?
Each bubble would be sandbox.
Yeah, each bubble would be a sandbox. So
For miniature text, but it's not major game changers.
There are.
Not major game changers like Mass Effect. It's not on that scale.
But they're still major.
Not on that scale. Like those games.
The scale doesn't matter. They're a major game changer. You could do one thing that would change the rest of the game.
No, there's not any points in the game. Yes.
so what about so you're right though. It's definitely these aren't set in stone. These are just concepts for you to think about. So what about a game? Has anyone played any of the Walking Dead series?
Yeah.
A little bit. The Telltale series?
Yeah. That's a great fit for branching, because every single impact decision you make is going to affect the rest of the gameplay and affect the ending.
You're talking about that really cartoony game?
Yeah, the stylized.
The comic book?
Yeah, it's like interactive media, like interactive story.
Something like Skyrim or the Fallout games would more fit the branching football and sandbox, right?
Yeah.
Like for Fallout 4 and Skyrim, you can still play once you've beaten the game.
So anybody have any idea of what Scraps is? The game that we're going to be working on? Where Scraps would fit into this?
Well, it hasn't told us what the ending is yet, or if it even has an ending.
Well, and like I replied to your thing, I think what the ending is implied through the document is that
She's trying to get to.
yeah, and that you will eventually basically be able to earn your way and pay your way into.
Well, she's trying to get to. It's never-
Online student just got it, and yep, Dalton just said it. String of pearls, right? So these choke points could be transitions between each one of your individual areas. So that's one way to look at it as a string of pearls. So this could be one student A, transition student B, transition student C, or this could also be your own actual level. Think about these in terms of these are rooms or objectives. It doesn't matter how you complete it, but the player completes one objective, moves on to the next area. They complete another objective, they move on, and then so there's a string of pearls inside of a string of pearls. Hopefully that doesn't blow anybody's mind. So if that makes sense, that we're definitely, like, we want these linear elements. We want players to be experiencing almost the same thing every time. You want to be designing an experience that can showcase that you can communicate and teach players exactly what it is you want them to do. So in lab today, we're going to be actually playing through this example gold. So it's here in the content folder. We're going to be doing this in lab, and I recommend to all the online students that you download this and play through it yourself. That way you can see where the bar is and what we're going to be shooting for. Not for this class, but this is going to be at the end of this whole 3-month process of making your map here, level design functioning, getting your map functioning and blocking it out. And then this will be where you're going to be at the end of project and portfolio 3. So we're going to play through this today, and it'll give you a really good sense and understanding of what another team has accomplished, and then really start to complete the whole picture. So any questions at all about the common progression models? No, pretty straightforward. This is going to be, when I send out the archive, I'm going to have a link to this in the announcement. So if you want any of the documents from today, they'll be in the actual announcement. So moving on, we're going to just take a look at the level design document, and I'm just going to pull up the template and talk about each separate category and what we're looking for there. Let me just So definitely don't skimp on this stuff. Make sure that you take a look at the common mistakes and definitely read through this. Very important information, and it's very apparent to people who read through this and definitely the ones that don't. Definitely the common mistakes are very important as well, and we're going to cover that in the next lecture. Tuesday's lecture, we'll be going over the common mistakes in full detail. So definitely read through this. So I'm just going to go to this template link and talk about these different areas and what we're looking for in each one. So very important that you guys pay attention to this, because this is like the backbone to the rest of the month and the rest of this production cycle. So definitely ask questions if you have any about any of this stuff. So the stuff at the top here, time of day, climate, weather, geographical region, this stuff is all well and good and important that you fill this stuff out. And this is where I want you to include any type of visual element of the game or of your level. Once you get past this, you don't have to tell me what it's going to look like and what the player's going to be feeling and the story and all the back stuff like that. I only care about the actual player actions, the rest of the document. What is the player doing? What is the interaction? What is the task that the player is going to accomplish? So any of the visual stuff or the artsy stuff that you want to include, like the setting and the time of day, all that, that's for right here. When we get down into the meat and potatoes, we want player action. You should be able to read these sentences and visualize in your head what the player is doing. All right? So the player goal. Give the player a single specific compelling goal to accomplish in your area. So as soon as I come in, I walk into your area, what am I trying to accomplish? What is the task? I'll tell you right now, making it to the end, getting through a maze, those aren't acceptable goals. The player's going to get to the end anyways, right? Make it something awesome. You guys are game designers. Do you know how many times I've seen, I want to power on a generator? Okay, well, I have to accept that. There's some creativity, there's gears turning there, but I've been working in this since January of 2014, 2015. So almost, no, 2014. So almost 2 years working with scraps, and I've played and activated a lot of levels that have generators. So if you, same thing with the crowbar example last time, you're going to have these ideas, and I promise you that they're not the first time I've seen them, but there's still possibility and there's still room for creativity with a generator, right? There's a lot of creative things you can do, but don't just make it I walk up to it and I press E. Do something more with it. Maybe there's pieces that are missing and there's a lot of awesome parts that need to be attached and there's a lot of gameplay attached to it. then that's going to be acceptable and it's going to separate from you from all the others. But think of something awesome that the player is going to be accomplishing and what it is that they're going to be doing. So with your player goal in mind, your major setups are going to be tied directly to those. Does anybody have any questions at all about that? Clear about player goal? All right. So for the featured asset, a lot of confusion with this sometimes. Yep.
Does the player goal have to be progressive, or can it be learning a new mechanic, such as how to dodge a turtle?
I mean, that could be something that's going to happen in your area. That would be fit more into a minor setup. But your player goal is, what are the things the player has to, yeah, like what is the things the player has to accomplish to make it out of your area? What is the task they need to complete? Chris, you have a question?
So the player goal would be like what we were kind of coming up with in the ideas last class with the giant marshmallow destroying a building.
Yeah, like we were coming up with a broad sense of ideas, and that's what you're going to be doing in the brainstorming. And then you're going to start to categorize them and fit them into different areas. Like, what's my player goal? What are my major setups or my mechanics? And what are my minor ones? What are the smaller little tasks at hand? So the featured asset, sometimes there's confusion with this. I tried to make it as apparent as I could, like what we're looking for, as well as in the common mistakes. We have an example of a featured asset. The things to keep in mind, we don't want it just to be some visual object that you found off the internet somewhere. So for this, we don't want you using anything in the actual scraps assets that we've provided for you. You want you guys to either find something on your own, or even if you feel confident enough to model something in Maya, that's also acceptable, but it doesn't actually have to be an actual asset. It could be some type of system in Unity that's impacting the player or affecting the player, some type of thing you're putting time and effort into. But really, it's all about having some type of interactable object, some type of item for the player to engage with and interact with, and really leave the player with a memorable experience. So I'm going to jump over to the common mistakes and just show you guys an example. So here in this document, there's a list of all these, and you can just click on these, and it doesn't send you to another document, it just sends you down the page. So here is, what we're not looking for. So, just importing, importing a huge sign or a large vehicle, that's obviously okay, it's acceptable, but we want it to be interactive. We want it to leave the player with an awesome experience. So here is a really great example that a student had done in the past. This was a microscope. Not the most flashiest thing, not anything like you're just like, wow, this is amazing, like visually, but the interaction and the detail he put into this was very, very well done. So you'd go through this level and find different clues along the way, and you'd have to come up to this microscope and actually interact with it and inspect your clues, and that allowed you to progress moving forward. Like inside, when you inspected them, it gave you an even more in-depth clue, and you knew what to do from there. And what was really nice about this as well was you were able to, when you pressed E and interact with it, it took you out of that first-person view, or in this sense for you guys, it took you out of that third-person view, and it actually made it look like you were looking through this microscope, right? So actual detail went into this to take the player out of that perspective, and it was directly tied to the actual player progression. So definitely this is something that we want to see, like you're putting thought and effort into your featured asset and what it is you're going to be spending time on. Also think about it in terms of implementation. What is it going to take for you to implement this? If it's only going to take you maybe a half an hour or an hour, maybe you want to try and think about your complexity a bit more and have more bells and whistles, have more moving parts and more interactivity, and really design out all the parts of it. So in the next few months when you're working on this, you know exactly all the different systems that you want in place. So another really good example that I have would be like some type of vehicle, right? So we know that there's no drivable vehicles at all, but maybe in your level there's a vehicle that you need to steal and bring it back to the bast, right? So to make that a very interesting interactive asset, maybe there's a lot of things wrong with this vehicle. You finally find it, you make your way through the level, you find this vehicle, and now now it's missing a battery and it has a flat tire. So the player has to complete other tasks at the same time to maybe make their way through a junkyard and find another battery in a car somewhere. Bring the battery back with the grabnol. They carry the battery back and set it down, put it inside this new one. Now they need to, find some way to refill the tire, or they need to find a spare tire and kind of get everything in place. And then once it's all said and done, the player can interact and it takes them into this first person view, but the player doesn't drive it. It's just a cutscene of the car moving and the level ends like that. So you can see how there's a lot of moving parts. And I just said a battery and a tire, but maybe you guys could change out. Maybe it's just missing some type of parts. It's missing an engine, or it's missing a radiator cap or something. Just missing some parts. Try to make it interactive rather than just I found my featured asset and now I move forward. Also, try and stay away from having your featured assets be like a hazard in your level, like a tripwire or a mine. Like you're going to be working on those are your systems, but you want to make it an interactive and memorable experience. And also something that you can try and either model yourself or also just be able to find something unique on the internet somehow. Any questions at all about the featured asset? Okay, yeah, as you guys are working on this, feel free to ask any questions or, send me any messages. All right, so going back to the major and minor setups. So the first thing you want to think about with these is definitely your implementation and the time it's going to take to get these functioning inside of Unity. So your 15 minor setups, no surprise, this is tied into the fact that you need 15 different collectibles inside of Unity. In your level, or I'm sorry, in your map, you're going to need 15 collectibles. And we want to be using these in different ways. So avoid just having things laying on the ground, or you walk into a room, you collect an item, and you leave. Really make each one of these a different and unique setup. That way you're going to have a lot of variety and showcase your skills as a designer in different ways. So for your major setups, think about these as your overall mechanics. Things that the player is going to be doing and the different mechanics that you're going to have available, and you need to have at least 2 of them. Definitely stick to 2. Don't really go over that. If you'd rather have more mechanics, I'd rather see you just do 2 mechanics with multiple different examples. And these could definitely be tied. The major setups, you definitely want to have them tied to your player goal, right? So what are the major tasks? What are those major systems you guys are going to have to design to tie into the actual goal itself? And for your minor setups, these are more of just things to, like I mentioned with the collectibles, things to keep the player engaged along the way. You may have seen in the, I think it's the LDD assignment, we talk about the 10-second rule, or maybe the map assignment, where we don't want to ever just allow the player to press W and walk forward for more than 10 seconds, right? We want to keep the player engaged. In this day and age with, with technology, our attention spans are dropping faster than they probably should. Everyone just wants information as fast as possible. So if you're having just long, big empty spaces and not much interaction going on, you're going to lose players. So you got to make sure that your areas are dense and robust. And these minor setups are just for that. So, very, very simple and basic one would be, the player moves a box out of the way and they find a collectible underneath it. But you also can use that box to make some type of stairway to jump over and progress, right? So you're moving something out of the way and you're rewarding the player for doing so, and they're also able to take that object and make a small little staircase. So when you're thinking about your setups, think about them in the different ways that you're able to use them. Anyone here played Crackdown? Yeah. So awesome game that I really enjoy, and just in terms of collectibles, like not every game I play I'm really into, getting every single collectible. But games like that where they make it very enticing and almost easy for the player to not need like a strategy guide or, you can actually do it all in game and you can find them all. So they do a really good job of having some hidden ones where there's like sneakily hidden throughout the map, and also really do a good job for using them as breadcrumbs. They want you to get to a certain place So they put them where you're going to see them and draw your eye that way, and that way they almost build a pathway for you, as well as teasing you with them. Also really great mechanic, a great way to use the collectibles. So you can put them in a place where the player can see it. Maybe they can't quite get to it just yet, but they know, like, okay, I can get there somehow. And now it's all about, how do I get up there? How do I solve this puzzle to make it to that spot? How do I, like, lower this platform? Things like that to get to that collectible. So try and think of using your collectibles as different ways. Don't just think that it's just busy work, like, I have to have these 15 items, so I'm just going to put them all over the ground. Try and use them and reward the player, right? And it's all going to be about pacing and balancing, to making sure you're having some introductory ones at first and a little bit more challenging ones later on. So, and that'll definitely lead me into talking about here are the different setups, A, B, and C for your actual mechanics. Try and think about actually implementing them in terms of difficulty. So that's going to lead me right into talking about an IPM chart. So what an IPM chart is, it stands for Introduce, Practice, and Master. You have a question?
Would a minor item, this might be kind of cheating, would a minor item be a journal that would help give you a hint as to where or what to do?
A minor setup?
Yeah.
You just described to me like what this object is doing. I care more about, like you just said, a journal that describes what the player, or gives the player a hint of what they need to do. I care more about how am I getting that journal? When you told me that, I don't really have a sense of what the player is doing. I want more of the action.
Okay.
So how did the player find the journal, or what's the gameplay tied to that item? Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, that makes sense.
Actual actions. So IPM stands for Introduce, Practice, and Master. And this is a very common workflow that is used in the industry, and a really great way to detail out your ideas. So here's an example, and it is misspelled up top. This was from Final Project. They put an IMP chart, but it's supposed to be IPM. And what this represents is all their mechanics, and up here is their levels, right? So just want to give you guys an understanding of what an IPM chart is, and that way you can start to plan out your different phases and your different difficulties of your mechanics. So this is a game, it's a small little platformer where you're able to clone yourself, and you can make different versions of the clone. So here you can see in the darker, here's where you learn the derp clone, the boom clone, and the poof clone. So when you're building this, here's your levels up the top and your mechanics down the side, and you start to plan out horizontally how your mechanics are going to be laid out. So you have this really nice and smooth curve. But then when you're actually building this in a development sense, and you're working on a team, you'd be like, okay, Josh, you're assigned to level 3. So that means in level 3, the player needs to be practicing moving and jumping. You need to introduce them interacting with the environment, and you need to practice the derp clone using levers and springboards, right? So then you can very easily tell, like, all right, Grant, you're working on level 11. The player needs to be mastering the boom clone, practicing the scale and pulley, and introducing the poof clone, right? So the importance of this is you don't ever want to have it get to a spot where the player is using a mechanic for too long, or the gameplay is starting to get stale. You want to be introducing new mechanics along the way, and that's where you can see where the eyes form this curve at the top. But then you also want the player to be mastering their other mechanics that they've already previously learned. So when you come up with your 3 different examples here, I want you to be thinking about this in terms of introduce, practice, and master. Give 3 different examples of this mechanic and how you're going to use it. And if you guys want, I can give an example of this. Let me pull up I'm actually going to use a map from last month. All right, so on this map, here's a really good example of a mechanic broken down into basically 3 different uses, right? So here's his mechanic that he had here was just pretty straightforward, nothing complex or elaborate by any means, but it's functioning and it's definitely feasible. So here he's going to introduce to the player this concept of turning a valve or interacting with a sprinkler system to put out these fire volumes here. So here he's got here this lock represents where it is and what it is that the player needs to interact with. So here is the introductory version of this. So the player puts it out. The player is going to see that the sprinklers turn on, put out the fire, and behind it is a collectible, right? So you're immediately rewarding the player with doing this action that you want them to. So this is just introducing it to the player. Here in this next example, the player is starting to practice this concept. So the player is going to go over, follow this path, grab the valve now. So the valve is broken off, and the player needs to use the grav null to carry it over to the pipe where it goes. And now once it's locked in place, the player can interact with it, and it puts out this fire volume. And now it puts out the fire here, and now the player can progress. So this one is very important that the player understands this because they can't go forward until they complete this. All right? In this example, it's just introducing it. It's safe. If they don't do it, it's okay. But here, they need to actually use this mechanic before they're able to move forward. Down here in this last area, so what he wanted to do and this will tie into this mastery level. This is why I consider this portion a mastery level and not a practice, is because he wanted to have some type of timer or some type of element that's making the player hurry through this. So once this gets through this point, at this note 16, he wanted there to be a certain amount, the player has a certain amount of time to jump out this window before something happens. That was his premise. So the reason with that pressure on the player, here he wants the player to grab a physics object with the grav null and throw it at the valve. And the valve is going to break and it's going to turn on the water and put out the damage volume. So again, the player needs to do it to progress, and now they're also under the sense of pressure. So that's more of a mastery level concept of that mechanic. So there's 3 examples of that's one mechanic, right? My mechanic is I'm going to interact with valves to be able to put out fire, or I'm going to be able to interact with sprinkler systems to put out this fire. That was his mechanic, right? But once he just has that as his core, it's like, okay, now what cool things are you going to do with that? How are you going to actually make that a viable concept in the level and not just have a bunch of spots all over, you just walk up to it, press E, walk up to it, press E, because at that point you're just rinse and repeat. Once you have this functioning, what are the cool things you're going to do with it? And that's what I want to see in these different examples down here. All right, and then so the minor setups, I talked about them briefly. That's just all of your filler things. So in between your major setups like that, what are the smaller little tasks that the player is going to be completing along the way? And this will definitely start to click and make a lot more sense once we play through the example level. But what all those little interactions, all those minor things, so using the grav null, even just platforming and just interacting with things. So there's a lot of times where it's just me, I'll get into a level and the player's here and now it's this empty hallway and that's where I'm going to, is that door down there. So rather than just having completely empty, nothing going on, have some type of setup there. Have just things for the player to jump over or just obstacles to crouch underneath or just some type of interaction, something. Like this is where the design element and the creativity comes in. You guys have the ability to put in that spot whatever it is you want. I'm allowing you to do anything you want within the creative vision. So come up with some type of small little interactive setup. And these, in terms of implementation, your minor setup should only take you 15 to 20 minutes to implement. Actually building it out in Unity and testing this scenario out should not take you very much time. And in terms of gameplay, this should only be about 8 to 10 seconds of gameplay, okay? So also keep in mind, you guys are designing an area that is 2 to 4 minutes of actual gameplay. I see sometimes some students will turn in their LDD and be like, this is 25 minutes of gameplay. It's going to take them 25 minutes to get to my level. I'm like, that's a long time. And then you want to think of, ideal playthrough, they're doing everything that I'm laying out for them, it's going to take you 2 to 4 minutes. And the reason why is, so the reason why you have you do 15 of these, so if each one of these takes you 10 seconds, and there's 15 of them, that's 150 seconds right there, right? So that's 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That's what you need. That's going to be the meat and potatoes. And then using these mechanics to accomplish your goal, that in combination of itself is going to be your gameplay and enough for the player to be doing and enough for you guys to be working on the next few months. So any questions at all about the LDD or the IPM chart? No? All right. Alrighty, so now we're just going to switch gears for the rest of the lecture, and we're just going to talk about a few different technical things, just some tips and tricks around the level blocking meshes, how you use them, and just a little bit of understanding of what's going on. So you'll notice that everyone should have this level blocking meshes menu up here at the top, and if you click on it, you're going to see all these different options that you have available to you, right? So wedges, really awesome shape. One that Unity should definitely provide by default, but that's here nor there. But this is a really great shape that's going to allow you to create ramps and create basically wedges in different ways. So I'm just going to create a few different objects here. Let's see. I'm going to also make an arch. This is a good one. How's a cylinder? All right, so I got a few different objects here, and what you're going to notice is they're coming in with this material already on them. So by default, we have the level blocking mesh being created with this utility grid material. So make sure that's the case, and you're going to notice a few different things compared to the primitive objects and the level blocking meshes. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a 3D object, a cube. So just a Unity primitive. And why is it all the way over there? All right, so you can tell that this just comes in with Unity's default material. There's no actual texture to it, it's just a gray box. And one thing to note is how when I select this object, the pivot for this cube is in dead center of the object. If I'm toggling up here between this pivot and center button, you're noticing nothing's changing, right? Staying in that same location. On the level blocking meshes, right now it's on the center of the object, so it's in the center, that same location. But now I hit pivot and it snaps to the corner. This is really, really helpful because this allows you to snap objects together much more easily and much cleaner, and just allows you to make adjustments a lot better. So being able to move things on that pivot means you're very easily able to rotate around a corner, right? So I can very easily start to snap these in place where I want them and rotate around. So here's so if I wanted to rotate this, I can rotate it, in place around that pivot. But with the Unity objects, it becomes a little bit tougher because if I want to do that same thing, now I got to duplicate the object. Now it's in place, but now if I want to rotate it, I need to rotate it and then move it. So I'm not getting that same control and the ability to rotate something and create this. You can almost create an arcing shape with the pivot being on the corner. So very nice convenience that you have with these meshes. So definitely making sure that you're snapping things to corners. That way you're able to get precise movement like that. You may also notice that when I'm rotating, objects are snapping like that. I don't ever just rotate freely like this. I always like to make sure that the rotations are a clean value. So to do so, you can hold down Control while you're either moving, rotating, or scaling any object. So I'm sure you guys are aware that's WER to go move, rotate, scale. That's how I'm switching so easily with those. And then you hold Control to snap. So if you're not aware of the snap settings, you can go to Edit, Snap Settings. This will pop up this window here. And now this is by default, Unity sets to snap by 1 unit within the transform, 0.1 in scaling, and 15 degrees in rotation. So when I hold Control and rotate, it's going to snap in those 15-degree increments. Even though for some reason it's not going to the whole number. There we go. And if you ever get your object off of, so say I'm starting to move this in place and I rotate and now I was like, oh crap, I have all these decimal points, how do I get it back? You can select your object and hit snap all axes and it's going to snap them in place. And it looks like that's only going to be working for the actual transform values. Yep, it's only going to do that for your transforms. But just this is using this method and actually being conscious of how many units you're making certain objects and snapping them and getting everything lined up correctly and accurately to each other is really going to impact how your level is built and how you're actually constructing the geometry in your level. So it's okay to make fine adjustments where you're like rotating things so it doesn't look completely completely parallel and like almost perfect to where like it was built by a robot. In scenes, to make things feel realistic, you want like non-linear lines. You want like breaks in your line and things like that, so you can actually start to build out a believable scene, right? With too many straight lines, your eye just starts to run down that line and connect to the corner to a point. So you want to break that up as much as possible. So it's okay to have fine little adjustments, but when you're blocking out a level and you're prototyping your mechanic, you want these actual senses of, okay, this is 2 units, this is 5 units, and have a really good idea. Question?
Just as a simple example, could you show a way to procedurally make a brick wall with this level blocking tool?
A brick wall?
Yeah.
Like you want to...
Yeah, just to create a brick wall where the pieces that you're moving are separate like that.
You want to have individual bricks in your wall?
Breaking and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can cover that. That's something we're going to get to later on. But if you want to have actual individual bricks, you would probably want to start with, if you want to start with some base portion of the object that like isn't going to fall apart and then have the breakable pieces around it. Or you can actually get some things where it's just a fully destructible wall that you can just select your mesh and then Unity is going to procedurally break it up. But that's something that we can go over a little bit in lab, definitely. So you also notice on these level blocking meshes, you have this pink dot up here in the corner. This is just another tool that's going to make it easy for you guys just to manipulate and move objects around. So when I'm grabbing this, when you click on it, you're actually going to get another widget, another little gizmo that comes up that you can move. So I'm just going to hold Control and start to move this around. And you notice that I'm actually scaling the object in the direction that I'm moving it. And what's happening is that this texture isn't stretching or distorting or anything like that. It's actually staying uniform with the mesh, right? You can tell because that grid pattern is still consistent. It's not being stretched at all. If I were to go ahead and try and maybe just block out a wall just like I was here, but this is just a Unity primitive. And now I'm just going to take that same material that I have, the utility grid, and I'm going to apply it to this object. See how it's starting to stretch, right? It's just a one-to-one stretching that texture across that. So when I actually put something on here like a brick texture, something like that. I think I have one. Notice how it's stretching and skewing, and even like on the top here, it's starting to really distort that object. But if I put that same texture, same material on here, it's starting to repeat itself, and we can actually adjust the amount that this is repeating. So that's another thing that we have available to us. So in the level blocking mesh cube here, you're going to have every level blocking mesh comes with this texture position and texture tiling, right? So right now it's set to tile 1. It's just default, that's what it's set at. And now in this option, obviously we don't have that same ability to control that. So we would have to actually go into the material itself, change the tiling, and now every single Unity primitive is going to need its own material. So you can see that's going to be a huge headache. Every object has its own material. That's not fun stuff to deal with. But with the level blocking meshes, it's going to be uniform across, and you can adjust the tiling on an actual object here. So I'm just going to duplicate this a few times so you guys can see the difference.
And if you made it thinner, would the material still stay?
Yep, that's a great question. So if I make it thinner, is the material going to stay? So if I can just grab this object here, and this is one unit I'm snapping, so I'm going to just not snap and just slide this. See, the material isn't even moving at all. It's just staying as is, and it's just the UVs, which we're going to get to, what UVs actually are actually being moved with the geometry itself. So nothing is affecting the resolution of the texture.
So it's acting more like a mask than like an actual texture.
Not quite, but I'm going to explain. In this little demo, I'm going to explain to you why that is and what UVs actually are. Hopefully that'll definitely be like give you guys an aha moment of what's going on. So here it is. These are all set to texture tiling of 1. All right. So I'm just going to change this one to be 0.5 and 0.5. So for this, you want to make sure you have you're affecting both of these because it's a square texture and these need to be the same values unless you want to start to skew and distort things. So you can notice if I change this to be 1, right, my bricks are much smaller now and they're being squished and the texture isn't its ideal resolution. So you can adjust these and find something you like in this scenario, you guys are just making the best with the tools you have available, right? You're not going to be able to fully model out a brick wall and have intricate bricks. Like you can have some smaller cubes and kind of shove them in and create that silhouette that you're looking for. But we just don't have the time and the resources to make every single thing exact. So this will give you at least some control and power to give you exactly what it is you want. So this one's at 1, this one's at 0.5, and then this one I'm just going to make, let's just do 0.1. So huge bricks, right? So I'm just going to play this, and I'm just going to see which one feels right to me, right? Like that one, those ones seem a little small, but that could work. And also just look at the pattern of it itself. Like this texture isn't, it tiles, right? But it definitely has some issues. You can see where those white bricks are almost creating stripes vertically. Let me use my mouse. Like here you can see that same white pattern. And then here you can see those small little bricks are creating that horizontal pattern. So that's just how a texture is tiling and how it's created. That's nothing on you guys. But that's just something to be aware of and starting to notice that. This one here, these are a little bit bigger. Could be believable, right? Those could be just larger bricks somewhere. That one's 0.5, and now this one is obviously way too large. But that just shows you like the difference in changing those actual values. Yes, because I'm tiling the texture. I'm tiling it less. I'm tiling it half the amount of times. Right. So if I change this to 2, they're going to be even smaller because I'm tiling it twice as much as this one. Let me see if I can play again. See, these ones are there's twice as many, almost even probably exponentially more because it's tiling both ways, but they become smaller because we're increasing how many times it's tiling. No, usually what's going to slow the engine down is the size of your textures. So most of the time artists will be only allowed like, okay, you have to stick to 512 by 512 pixel textures, and our character is going to be 2048 by 2048 or 1024 by 1024. It all depends, like that kind of stuff will all depend on where it is that's like how important is this object. For your ground, and also like what kind of game it is, right? For your ground on like a first person shooter, you can't have a very shitty looking texture, excuse my language, because otherwise it's right up in the player's face. But things that are way off in the background, like big buildings that are just meant to be silhouette, they can have a very, very low texture resolution because they're far away from the player, right? But if you're right up on something, you want a really detailed texture like this. So okay. So the position, pretty straightforward. How it sounds. It's just how the texture is positioned. So let me go back to. I'm gonna change this back to 0.5. All right. All right, so the texture position, and I don't know if you guys know this, but you can grab any element like this or any attribute that has like a slide value, and you'll notice it changes from the mouse to the mouse with two little arrows on it. So you can click and actually slide this. So the position is just moving that texture on that object in the X direction, so like this, and the Y like that. So that can be helpful, making minor little adjustments, hiding things from repeating. So that's just another control that's available to you.
So like if you're making a character and you're using this,
You
could use like make a Photoshop with several different portions of the texture having different materials on them, and then just move the texture around and put the materials on it.
close, yeah. I mean, if you were trying to make a character out of these blocks, I mean, you're not going to get much farther than you did, like than you can see with the character himself here, right? Like it's just a bunch of basic shapes. But we could very easily like texture this guy and put a different material on each one of these and line it up, right? Like we could have we were talking about having like the caution student driver sign that new drivers will have. We wanted to have right on his back say caution student designer, so he's running around. So you could actually texture things like that way, but if you were actually trying to make a character, you would want to actually use a modeling piece of software, and this is focused more on just environmental construction and blocking things out. That's what you want to be working with these tools for. All right, so that's really how the texturing and the tiling works. A few of the other shapes, I mean, most of the shapes are all straightforward. Each one is going to have this little pink widget that you can, move around and control with this way. The real special one that's unique from all the others would probably be this arch shape. So by default, it's going to come in and it's going to be this type of shape here where you have a lot more different options in this actual texturing position and tiling. So you can click this checkbox and it's going to be either squared or rounded. So the squared is really good for if you want to make like a doorway. So I think even down here we don't even have them in yet. Right, like this could be this little setup right here could be changed out with a little archway like this, right? This is what it's made for. Is we noticed that when we had the tool like this, you would have just like this piece like shoved in between two doorways, something like here, and then there would be that gap in between, and it would be students would have a tough time filling that out. So what we did is we just made it squared, so now you can very easily fit that in better. And I should snap it all together, but I'm not going to right now. Right, so that you can use that to fit things in. You also have ability to change the number of sections, so you don't need to go too high and too crazy with it. But if you have a large opening, right, like this is going to depend on how large your object is. So if I have a really large like tunnel, maybe I'm making a large tunnel that that would be like through a mountainside or something like that. I wouldn't want to have just like 4 sections, right? You want more geometry for bigger things like that, so you'd increase it that way. And probably just about 12, something like that. So also here you have the control of the radius, and you got to be careful with this because sliding it becomes really sensitive. So instead of 0.5, let me just try 0.25. maybe 1. There we go. So, so a lot of this you just have to you have to play with and things like that. Your start angle and your bend angle. So being from 0 to 180, it's just half of a circle. And now I can just start to, if I put it to 360, it's going to give me this pipe shape. And then you can slide this. You can actually see it. It's you really want to be using it in 90-degree increments, right? So 90, 180, 270. You can try other things and find things that look right, but it's designed to be in these increments, maybe even 60 degrees. So let's try 120. Yeah, that could work. You could maybe hide this with another piece of geometry or something, but a lot of different control, right? Like, and one thing to keep in mind, everything that you've seen in this scene, everything you see in this scene, besides the terrain's a separate thing, was all made with the level blocking meshes, right? So you can see these little railings, the stairways, these little tunnels down here, a lot of different things. Let me change. That's probably just as hard to see. No. Yeah, but everything here was made with the level blocking meshes, right? So you have a lot of power and a lot of different things you can do with just simple shapes. All right, so what's something important to note about this is these textures are what's called a tiling texture, right? Everyone's probably familiar with that term, tiling texture. But this one tiles in 2 directions. So what's important to understand is there's some textures that are only meant to tile one direction. So I have an example here that I got from CG Textures or textures.com. You guys know about that website? No? So let me just go to that. It used to be called CG Textures, and now I think when you type in CG Textures and go to the website, it's going to read. Oh, spelled it wrong. That'll help. So that should redirect you just to textures.com. You have to sign up for an account, but it's completely free. What they do is they give you 15 free credits every day. So by every day you're allowed to download up to I think each one is 1 credit. It may vary on if you get certain things, but that's right where I got those textures from, right? So they have all different kinds of textures and resources for you. No, but what you can do is, if you are fancy enough, you can find ways to make a height map from this. Yeah. What? So here you can, yep, see, like these ones are free and they're 1 credit. And what you can notice is it'll tell you right here this is seamless. So this is already tiling for you. Bless you. So if you hit preview, this is what it's going to look like when it's tiling. So you get a good example of that. So yeah, this is a really great website. When I was a student, and I recommend this if anyone is really passionate about level design or just about this the artistic portion of game development, come on here every day and just start downloading your 15 credits worth. And I got back at my house on my own machine. I've got, basically I have this whole library on my own machine at my availability. And that's what's awesome about this is this is completely free and available to the public. So good resource to have. And they have all kinds of stuff. Most of this is just pictures that they've taken, but things from like concrete and just different floors and building structures and different types of just different goodies in here that you can really do what you want with. So the whole point I was trying to make is that there's a two-way tiling texture, and then there's something that's a one-way tiling texture. So I'm going to go ahead and put this texture on here, and you notice now it's starting to look like it's like a candy cane, right? Like it's starting to almost, I like to call it striping, right? So you're starting to see it repeat over and over again, and it doesn't look that it gets exactly what you want for this. So what you want to keep in mind is if you start thinking about this in terms of math, it's going to start to make a lot of more sense to you. So this is a scale of 4, right? So if I want this to fit properly on here, does anyone have any idea what I would want to change my tiling to? This is a scale of 4 in the Y. 0.25, right? So it's the opposite, or the, yeah. So now this texture is fitting, fitting vertically how it is in the texture itself, right? So now I can just grab this and stretch this out, and now this is my wall. So if I wanted to do the same thing, but maybe this is 3 units, I would do 0.33333, right? And now I'm just going to show a few different demonstrations here. Right, so this is, this is the same texture, and yes, it is a different resolution, but they're all uniform to each other, and they're all scaled properly. So that's a way that you can get an object to get a texture to fit to an object that you like. And yes, this isn't exactly perfect. We're not able to get this precisely how we want it, but this is showing an understanding of the tools, right? You're not going to have something that looks like, if you turn in something that looks like this, like you have like 1, obviously you did something wrong there. Something's not lining up properly. So you want to make sure that your resolution is as accurate as possible. Right, so real quick, I'm just going to open up Maya. But does anybody have any questions at all about the stuff? Yep.
Is there a way to use procedural textures or distance-based resolution textures?
Yeah, so like levels of detail on, yep, that's definitely possible with Unity. That's just because you want to take what your scale is of the object itself. Right, so this one is a scale of 4. So you can also just count to when you look at the texture. If I set it to 1, you see this 4 times. Right, this is up here 4 different times. And this looks like, right, like the resolution of this texture is correct, but we just want to have it 25% of the amount on here. Oh, wrong texture. That was the ground. Actually, before I jump into Maya, see, I got enough time. I'm going to show this off. So this is just something I was messing around with last night. And this is just a way for you guys to, as I keep saying, just make the best of the tools you have available to you. So let's use this one. All right, so for this example, I'm just going to basically turn this cube into something more of a usable asset for a character. So I'm going to just duplicate this. And part of this you can actually do by just choosing your texture and how you go about doing so. So actually I should make sure that this is, all right, so that's all 1, so I'm going to set this back to 1. Actually, let's see. I'm going to duplicate this, change the scale to 1, change these to 1. So I'm just going to make a thin little top piece. And now I'm going to use the texture position to try and get this top little lip up here. Let's change this to... So to match this texture here, I want to keep the same texture tiling, right? So this is the same 0.25 to 0.25. So it's not showing me the whole texture, but it's the same resolution. And now with this selected, I'm just going to move this in place so I get that little lip where I want it. All right, so now you can see that the lip that's on this one is now on this object. And now I'm just going to very slightly move this down a little bit. All right, And I'm just going to move this to negative 0.1. Let's try it the other way, negative 0.05. All right, now I'm going to just hide this little lip on this one here. So just move this down slightly. Now, because how this materials, how the texture is lined up, you're going to be able to actually keep everything intact, but hide those little piece. So now I want to actually change this to the center and scale this up just slightly. Yeah, so I'm trying to improve the silhouette of this object and actually make it into something. So I want to keep moving this, see if I can. I think 0.1 is where I like it. Okay, I'm going to go with that. So, it's not perfect, not exact, but it adds a nice little silhouette piece. I could refine that even further, but hopefully you guys get the point. You could do the same thing on the bottom there. But now you're just going to notice when I play, yeah, it still could be touched up a little bit, but you can notice that it's definitely starting to add to the believability. So rather than just have a cube with this texture on it, you can really push all the little pieces like that. And notice how the top of this isn't very, very pretty and not exactly what I'm looking for. But it doesn't really matter because I'm not going to see that as a player. So really only focus on where the player is going to see. So make this a little wider. Rather than exactly what it looks like from all angles. Because if you start to stress out and focus on making it look pretty from every single angle, it doesn't matter. Artists that work in games, they care about what the player is going to see. That's when you asked about having different resolutions of things and different levels of detail. That's important because if things are far away, we don't care that they're exactly perfect. We care about what the player is going to see. So in this sense, I'm never going to be able to see the top of that wall, so I don't really care. But you can tell about, even like here, how when I get to the end here, you can see the silhouette that's starting to be created. That's what's going to really add to your world and add to your detail. So you want to be able to create these interesting silhouettes. So eventually it doesn't just look like Cube World, right? And now if you wanted to go forward and add more bricks to this, you could start to go in and add a few pieces on the end of this with the same material to create an interesting silhouette, right? You're just using the best, you're doing the best you can with the tools you have available to you. So I think Maya's open now. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in here, and really what I want you guys to take away from this is what UVs are. So does anybody have any clue when I say the word UVs? Do you have any idea what I'm saying? Yep, so that's the mapping of the texture onto a 3D object. So I like to think of it as, imagine it's Christmas morning, right? You have a huge pile of presents underneath the tree, and they're all wrapped in Christmas paper. So rather than just shredding it all off and seeing what's inside, if you delicately take those off perfectly and there's no overlapping pieces, you could take your wrapping paper and lay it out flat, right? So you're laying out your wrapping paper flat, and now you can draw on it, texture it, write on it something, and then you can wrap it back up around that object again. So that's. And they do, right? And that's because there's a lot of very interesting curves and shapes in your face, like your nose, right around your ear, your jawline, a lot of organic shapes. And the more organic shapes, the more difficult and challenging the UVing process becomes. You have a question?
Yeah, is that what they did? Because I know in one of the Rainbow Six games, I think it was like on the PS2 or something like that, you were able to take a picture of your face, like using their camera or whatever, and then apply it to the character.
So procedurally,
sometimes it looked funky, like it's like
that's not me. Procedurally, what they're doing is they're taking an image and trying to automatically, some system is adjusting that image to fit within the UVs of the model and trying to fill in the gaps and just procedurally process the rest. That's what those are doing. Substance? What?
It's where you can use normal UV mapping, but add the intricate level of detail so you don't have to use super high resolution textures all the time.
Like a detail map? Like a detail normal map?
It's like node-based painting.
I'm not sure. We'll have to look into that. The mouse looks as large as it does over here. All right, so if I just create something simple, let's just go ahead and create a cube. All right. Now I'm just going to scale this up, and I'm just going to make a few different adjustments to this guy. So I'm just going to extrude. All right, so we got something funny looking like that. All right, so what I want to do is I want to create some UVs for this object. So it's important to know how to get to the UV editor, right? So let's go to UV editor. So by default, when you create a cube, and I'll just show you before I even modify anything, if I create a cube by default, same thing, it has these textures that Maya applies to it. So here in the UV editor, this is your UV space, right? So think about it in terms of X and Y, right? That's all it is. It's just a different name, U and V. So U and V space. So you'll see a texture map will fit inside of this 0 to 1 space. So now you want to do your best as an artist, and what artists do is they go through here and they're going to try and fit their UVs in here as best as possible to get the maximum resolution in all their textures. All right? So one thing you can do to actually create UV is something more usable. So you can select your object and go to Window or go to UV, and then there's different types here that you can actually choose from. So you can create a spherical map, a planar map, a cylindrical map, camera-based, or automatic. And these are just going to, Maya is just going to create something for you to get you started. So if you're creating something like a pipe or something cylindrical shape, it's probably smart to use a cylindrical map. Something more cubular, is that a word? Not sure, more cubic, you would create a planar map or even automatic. So if I click on planar, this is only going to do it from a certain plane. I think they still have contour stretch. That's new. So if I go ahead and do automatic, this is going to do it from a certain number of planes. Since this object here is pretty much still a cube with just an extra addition on it, I'm going to go ahead and do by 6. But here you can actually choose how many different planes you're going to project this from. So by default, I'm just going to leave it like this. Bless you. And I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. So you notice that now my UVs have changed. And let me see if I can, where's the shell color? All right, so this is a little toggle that just show you the shell color, so that might probably be easier for you guys to see. So by default, Maya has created these UVs for me, okay? And to display this a little bit easier, I'm going to assign a new material. All right, and now I have this file on my computer that I'll show you guys what it looks like. So this is just a basic, if you Google search like UV mapper, this is what most artists would use, something like this to put on an object. And the whole point of using something like this is making sure your resolution is square. All right, so I'm going to put that on here. I'm going to hit 6 to show it in Maya. And you can see how everything right now is pretty much relatively square to each other. There's nothing anything crazy and ridiculous going on. But let's see if I grab so this one here, so this shell I have selected. Let's see, I can turn off this texture. You guys don't see it here. There you go. So if I start to scale this up, see how now that one would be much smaller than obviously the others around it. So you want to get this as accurate as to each other as possible. And also this goes back to what's the player seeing, what's not important, right? If this is something on the ground that this whole face is not even important, you could just either delete this face or make the UVs for it very, very small. Right, so maybe this is some tower. I'm making some tower that's going to be going up in my area. So you want to make sure that these are as evenly spread out as possible. And then now you want to start thinking about your seams, right? So anywhere that there's a seam like this, you want to connect them so that you can't see where the texture is ending like that. So just like in Maya, when you're over here, you guys should be familiar with like vertex, edge, and face mode, the different modes in Maya. You guys a little familiar with that? Okay, cool. So just like that, the UV editor, you can select the same thing. So a shell is going to select a whole shell like this. An edge is going to select the actual edge, and you can see it's the same one as highlighting in the editor. You're right, and then I could even go to here, select an edge, and I'll come back to my UV editor, and now I know exactly what edge it is I want. So from here, it would be about moving and sewing and connecting them together, right? So you would hold Shift and right click, and you can move and sew them together. And you notice they're going to snap together like that, and now this shell is one big piece. So I can move all this around together. All right. So now that you guys have an understanding about UVs, the whole point of that is I just want you to start to understand how a 3D model works, right? So now maybe you can have a conversation with an artist. You understand about UVs. You understand what it is that they actually go through and how a model looks the way it looks in an engine. Now I'm going to show you something that's going to start to put all the pieces together. So all right, there should be object mode. All right, so there's a way in here to find it. Always changing stuff. There used to be, I'm looking for preserve UVs. It used to be, all right, I'm not seeing it in here anymore. All right, well, anyways, it's not finding it. There used to be an option in here, it's called preserve UVs, and pretty much what it's doing is once I UV this object, and now I'm trying to move some of these verts or make edits to my model, you're gonna notice when I move the verts, it's stretching my UVs. That's what's happening with that's what's happening with the Unity primitives when you're adjusting them, right? It's stretching these UVs. But with the level blocking tools, it's not. And I wish I could show you. So anyways, there's an option in here that's called preserve UVs. And what it will do basically is prevent your UVs from changing, or it's going to move them with your object. Yeah. It's very useful for doing just that, for making adjustments to a model after you've already UV'd it. Because really what you want to do is model your object and then put UVs on it and then texture it. Anyways, else you're going to be undoing work or having to go back and make changes.
Do the UV maps export to Unity properly in the same?
But you can use your UV map, but mostly what you would be doing with it is bringing it into Photoshop to do some texturing on. So you would lay everything out and you have a good sense. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to connect all these. All right, so I'd connect all these, make sure everything's fitting in my 0 to 1 space like this, get everything properly in there. And then what you can do is with your object selected, you go Polygons, UV Snapshot. This will pop up this window. You can change it to however big of a texture you want to make. So this will be exactly how large it is. I'm just going to put it on my desktop so I can find it. Okay, so now that should just save out an image for me. Oh, did I save the wrong? I think I saved the wrong file type. Yeah, I want a Targa with PNG. So, all right, so then that just created this image for me. So when you bring this into, when you would bring this into Photoshop or something, you can set this to, like a screen or an overlay, so you just see this outline. So then you can come in here and paint information in Photoshop or whatever 2D software program you prefer, and then you know exactly where this location is, and then you can come back to here. And then if something's off, you can just select the, you can like select your shell and like slightly move it in place and finely tune it, things like that. But the whole reason I'm showing you guys that is because that's what that is what is happening with the level blocking meshes. Why they're staying the way they are is when you're moving them, the UVs are moving with them. So on the break, I'm going to see if I can find that option to really show you that, because there was a tool that they had in Maya that really connected the two together and really made sense to you that way. So does anybody not know how to bring in an object from Maya into Unity? Do you want me to cover just exporting an object and bringing it into Unity? Yeah? You guys have all done that? Cool. All right, awesome. So pretty straightforward process. And also, use this tool as much as you want throughout this class, especially for the visuals and settings assignment. If there's something you want to try and tackle yourself or model inside of Maya and just do your best at it, and then just put some type of material on it in Unity. So if there's something in the scene that you want to try and tackle yourself in here, do a little bit of experimentation, do a little bit of practice with something simple, right? Like if you're a very amateur model or never done anything before, you don't want to try and model a whole character. Of course, you're going to get overwhelmed and frustrated and stressed out. Start with something really simple, like start with like making a pipe and actually putting a texture on it, or putting UVs on something simple like a pipe, and include that in your scene, and then maybe step up from there, and then really try and adapt and improve going along the way. Unity doesn't have a UV editor at all. So that's what is the importance of this. You can have different UV channels. So what you're going to notice here is there's different UV sets, right? So I can go ahead and here on this same object, polygons, I'm just going to go ahead and create empty UV set. All right, so now I have two UV sets. So I have map 1 and I have UV set. You notice that this one's completely blank. The reason you would have multiples would be because for things like light maps, every object in your scene is going to, if you bake your lighting into your scene, has a separate UV channel for you to bake all your information into. So most of the time you'll just create an automatic map, and you just want everything to be present, right? So you're going to notice this would be, I could rename this, and this could be my light map, and then this would be where my texture information would go. But you can't actually manipulate or control the UVs really in any way other than like a script in Unity. There's no easy way for you. That's why when the instructor that wrote this tool gave you guys the ability to actually adjust these values, because it gives you a little bit more control inside of Unity. And that goes for most game engines. Really, you don't have any game engine where you can, well, I know Unreal or UDK allowed you to just like procedurally generate UVs for an object if you didn't have any, but you weren't allowed to move them or manipulate them. It was just whatever the system gave you. So I just wanted you guys to just get a little exposure to that. I'm not expecting you guys to go home and become amazing 3D modelers and texture artists and be able to UV any object thrown at you, but I want you guys to at least get an understanding of how these objects are working and how they go from a 3D model creation tool into Unity and all the pieces that go with it. There a question?
That kind of answered a little bit, and I was just kind of curious, like in a normal work environment, if a game designer would be required to know that kind of like advanced texturing like that.
Not necessarily, but I mean, you could definitely be a game designer and be like, I'm specialized in level design. And when you go through your level, like you want to communicate your vision as best as possible, right? It's about making sure everyone's on the same page as you, and that way you're able to make sure everyone is on board with you, and one, like understanding what is accomplished, what you want them to be doing, as well as where the project is going. So the more information you have, and even if you can just go in there and like, the reason I want you to do that is because I wanted to show you guys that is in case like you run into an object on the online, right? And you're like, well, this model's here, but the texture looks like crap. Why is that? I wanted you to be able to understand why that model looks really weird or what's wrong with that. You're not necessarily going to be expected to do that, but if you go into a job interview and you know programming, you know Unity, you know all this, and you also know Maya, you can block out things and give them basic materials, right? And you can make things look semi-decent, right? All those skills together are going to be very beneficial for you and set you apart from anybody else that's applying for that same job. So even if a few of you actually like go in there and mess around with the UVs, then I feel like I've done my job. I just wanted you guys to get some exposure to that and see another part of Maya and how you can improve on that. So if anyone wants to work on their own model or do their own asset for any part of the level in these next few months, I'll definitely be here to answer any questions like that. So I'll be around from this month, next month, and then Project and Portfolio 3. You guys will be seeing a lot of me, so as well as the guys in the back of the room. So if you guys have any questions about any of this stuff, I'll definitely be more than happy to answer them, as well as lynda.com. I know you guys have a super busy schedule and a lot going on, but as a Full Sail student, you have access to lynda.com, and they've got all kinds of really, really good Maya tutorials on just understanding modeling, understanding texturing, and basically getting an object ready for a game engine. All right, so any other questions at all or anything?
So if we took a modeling course previously and have already pre-made models, are we allowed to bring those into here, or would you prefer us to start fresh and make them from scratch now?
So if you want to bring in any previously made models, I'm okay.
I've done the Firefly spaceship.
I mean, I think if you have outside assets that you've already created, I think it's going to be more applicable in like Project and Portfolio 3, where you're actually focusing on that stuff. So I mean, for this, we're doing this I'm just getting you guys exposed to some of the tools, and the visuals and setting assignment, you're just going to be recreating an image that I have chosen for you guys to just do your best on, to block out and get get a sense of what's going on. But I'm not against using anything from before, but I don't want you just using it just because you have it, right? Like
Right.
if it's a spaceship,
If it's the thing-
if it fits within, then I'm okay with that.
I have to say, probably the worst movie I've ever done.
Oh, yeah.
So this is the image that you guys will be working on for the visuals and setting assignment. So really just do your best to, this one isn't too difficult. So really do your best to capture everything in this image. Really start to look at these different materials and go to textures.com to try and find things that match this as best as possible. And then start to pay attention to the details, right? So you could even see these little windowsills up in the corner. It looks like there's even another building way in the back there. Looks like there's lighting coming from back there. So all in this little almost looks like a cellar entryway leading downstairs somewhere. There's these little archways, really good spot there to put in those little, oh God, what are they called? Brain fart. I'm cheating. Arches, yes. Good opportunity to put in little archways there and really try and break this down as best as you can. So we should have some assets for you to create these dumpsters. If you want to try and model this yourself, could be something you want to, or even make it out of level blocking meshes. Either way, I'm fine with it, right? This is just basically a simple cube with some wedges and some cylinders there. Really try and just get as detailed as possible and translate this as best as you can into Unity. So as far as turn-ins go for that, I want to just talk about the little presentation tidbit and what that actually means. So I'm going to put this in the assignment itself. Let me just pull up an example.
You said to avoid traps.
No, you just want to avoid traps. Traps are fine for the traps are fine for your minor setups, your smaller little things, but avoid those being like your player goal or your featured asset, right? Like if a tripwire is going to be in your level, it's not necessarily a featured asset. It's
Right, it's an option.
yeah, it's more of a mechanic or something that you can introduce, practice, and master. Second, section 1. All right, here we go. All right, so this is from a few months ago, something that one of my online students had completed. So he did a pretty good job. I mean, definitely still room for improvement here, things that could have done a little bit better, but overall he did a pretty strong job of paying attention to the details and trying to capture as best he could all of the essence of this picture, right? Also, just look at his presentation of everything, right? It's not like he just took a screenshot of his computer and you can see icons and you can see like the actual display of the computer. It's just two images that were taken and put side by side so you can compare them and also put your contact info. So the whole point of this, those presentation points, those 5 points for the assignment, is just the overall presentability of this project, right? So you want to be able to put this right on your portfolio that you guys created for design tools. Like put this right on your website. This is something that I worked on. This is one of my small little projects. So this would be a 5 out of 5 with the presentation. Question?
Yeah, do you know what do you
What do you,
use? No? Okay.
what do you put this together with?
Yeah, like just the two images together and then.
So you can just put this together with a Google drawing. So you can just go to your Google Drive, and that's pretty much what a lot of the stuff we're going to be doing in here is going to be coming from. So it could just be a Google drawing, right? And then just make this a bit larger, paste your two images in here. You can set the background to a certain color, paste your images in here, put a small little text box, and then you can submit this link right to Perforce. So you'll see that if you haven't already seen in the brainstorming instructions, the brainstorming LDD instructions, you're pretty much just creating a shortcut and submitting it to Perforce. And that way I'm able to very easily come over here, and I can show you another one. I can come over here and just I don't even have to get the latest. I can just double click on your link, and it's going to open up a link for me. All right, so there's another example. All right, any questions about that stuff?